Hare Krishna. So till now, Krishna has very clearly described to all of us that how he is the maintainer of all of us in the bound state in this material world. And then Krishna also spoke about how he is the compiler of the Vedas, knower of the Vedas, and to be known from the Vedas. So now to help us out to get closer to liberation, or to march on the path of liberation, or to go back home, back to Godhead, he is giving us the transcendental knowledge. He is giving us the first step on this path of bhakti, that is Sambandha Gyan. He is giving us the knowledge of our relationship with him and this material world and spiritual world. So, Shloka number 16, 17 and 18, they are called as 3 Shloki Gita and 3 verses, so 3 Shloki Gita. And in these 3 verses, Krishna is giving us the Sambandha Gyan, the knowledge of our Sambandha or relationship. So let's start with the first verse, that is Shloka number 16. Dvau imau purushau loke Sharaschakshara evacha Kshara sarvani bhutani Kutastokshara uchyate. So Krishna is saying, Dvau imau purushau loke. So in this world, in this entire creation, there are 2 types of purushas or living entities. The first one, the 2 types, what are those 2 types? Kshara and Akshara. So that means fallible and infallible. And then he says, Ksharaha sarvani bhutani. In this material world, the living entities are fallible, they can fall. And Kutastaha Akshara uchyate. And the spiritual world, every living entity is infallible, like the Lord. So, this is one of the important Sambandha Gyan, that there are 2 types of living entities. One, who are bound or Kshara, fallible ones. And second, liberated or Akshara, that is infallible. So, let's try to understand this very, very important concept, the concept which talks about our position in this material world. Now here it is said that the living entities are eternally separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna is telling in Bhagavad-gita, the same chapter we saw, he is saying, Mamaivamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha. So each and every living entity is my part and parcel. And they are eternally my part and parcel. Sanatanaha, the word there was very important, Sanatanaha. So eternally we are its parts and parcels, all the living entities. Now when the living entity is in contact with the material world, when we are there in this material world, bound, so at that time the living entities are called as Jiva Bhuta. Here it is given, Jiva Bhuta. And the Sanskrit words given here are Ksharaha Sarvani Bhutani, mean that they are fallible. So we are bound in this material world. And so we are called as Jiva Bhuta. And the second one, that is the ones who are liberated. About them it is spoken here. So the ones who are nowhere in contact with the material world. Those who are in oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, are called infallible. So there, the ones who are bound in the material world, they are called as Jiva Bhuta. And the ones who are liberated and who are there in the spiritual world, they are called as Brahma Bhuta. Now here it is said, oneness does not mean that they have no individuality, but that there is no disunity. They are all agreeable to the purpose of creation. So the difference between Jiva Bhuta, that is we living entities bound in the material world, and Brahma Bhuta, the ones who are liberated. So the difference between the two is what? Here in this world, we are not in one, we are not in sync with the Lord's desire. But when it comes to the spiritual world, they all are in sync with the Lord's desire. So that is the oneness that is spoken about. So oneness is not about merging or mixing. Oneness is about being one with the Lord's desire, agreeable to the purpose of creation. In the material world, we have our own purpose and we are busy solving that or marching towards that. But then The purpose of creation is something which only Lord knows and Lord has given us. The ones who are in sync with that purpose and the desire of Krishna, they are the liberated souls, and they are in the spiritual world, or the ones who are going to get liberated and go to the spiritual world. So here it is said, the living entities who are struggling in this world with the mind and five senses have their material bodies which are changing. As long as a living entity is conditioned, his body changes due to contact with matter. Matter is changing, so the living entity appears to be changing. So there in the Shloka, 15th chapter, I guess Shloka number 7, where Krishna makes it very clear that all are my parts and parcels. Yes, 7th Shloka, Mamaivanshpa Jiva Loke, that particular Shloka. So he is telling that Manasasthani Indriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. So all are my living entities, but all are my parts and parcels, but the living entities in the material world, they are struggling with 6 senses, out of which the leading one is the mind. So now here it is very nicely said. If suppose someone says, Prabhuji, how to understand? Are we Jiva Bhuta or Brahma Bhuta? Are we liberated or are we bound? So here is the answer, that as long as the living entity is conditioned, his body changes due to contact with matter. Matter is changing, so the living entity appears to be changing. So what are the changes that we have in our bodies? There are 6 changes that the body goes through: birth, growth, duration or existence, reproduction, dwindling, and vanquish or death. So these are the 6 changes that the body goes through. And here it is said that any living entity who comes in contact with the matter, this material world, be it Brahma or be it an ant, it is said that the body is changing, therefore they are fallible. So whosever body is changing, they are fallible. So this is a very, very important point to note. So we are stuck in the cycle of birth, death, old age and disease. This is the point that is made. So this material world is called as Kuntha, the place full of misery. So we are stuck in the cycle of birth and death, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, that is birth, death, old age and disease. And along with that we have sufferings. We are suffering because of our own body and mind. We are suffering because of other living entities. We are suffering because of the natural calamities. So in Sanskrit they are called as Adhyatmika Klesha, Adi Bhautika Klesha, Adi Daivika Klesha. So in this way the 4 problems, real problems of life, birth, death, old age, disease, and the 3 miseries that everyone goes through because of the body, mind, because of others, because of the natural calamity. So the living entity is suffering in this world lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So this place is called as Kuntha. This material world is called as Kuntha. Now let's talk about the spiritual world. So we said that here the bodies keeps changing. So the bodies change here. So what about the spiritual world? So here it is given. Spiritual world, the body is not made of matter, therefore there is no change. See, only the matter changes, right? Spirit will never change. So in the spiritual world, the body is spiritual. Sat, Chit, Ananda. The body is Sat, eternal, Chit, full of knowledge, Ananda, full of bliss. So the person or the personalities in the spiritual world, they have completely spiritual body. Spiritual means permanent, material means temporary. So we have material body here in this world, so it keeps changing. There it is spiritual body, so it is always permanent. And then here it is said that in the spiritual world, the body does not change. There is no Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi in the spiritual world. So this world was called as Kuntha because of these sufferings. So that place is called as Vaikuntha because there is no suffering. No Janma, no Mrityu, no Jara and no Vyadi. No birth, no death, no old age and no disease. That's the speciality of Vaikuntha. It's only bliss, no suffering. And finally it is said here, in the spiritual world, however, they are always liberated in oneness. They are always liberated. They are in sync with the desire of the Lord. The only thing that happens in the spiritual world is service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no selfish sense gratificatory desires like we have here in the material world. So in this way we understand our position. So we get the Sambandha Gyan, that who are we and where are we stuck. And we also get the knowledge of the spiritual world, the destination of all the spiritualists like ourselves. So after having spoken about this, Krishna is going to give us more details about this Sambandha Gyan. So let's see that in the next video. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna,